It was just one small mistake. A wrong turning, not my fault, surely. Anyone without prior knowledge could have gone down the same path as I did. But now I have to bear the consequences, stand up to the repercussions and face the pain. Don't be surprised about my telling you about the pain. What did you expect? It's hardly going to be pain-free. Not like a physical pain, of course. No, I would not have expected that from what I did. But maybe others would disagree, like the surlier neighbours that you know I have would be bound to dig deeper and make the hurt worse. Are you so surprised about that? You know too how vicious they have been once they penetrate the hard shell of my shyness. Oh, for heaven's sake, we are grown up now, adults at last. This is not the inevitable bullying of the playground or the journey home. It was just one mistake. And I admit that I'm sorry, but it is now too late. Little hope lies here. I was warned that my foolishness would lead to an eternal punishment. That's the weight of my pain now. Embarrassment. Are you too getting ready to accuse me? I can't make it go away. The deed is done. Though it is perhaps too early to predict it'll be a total tragedy. You can see, as you fly alongside me, clutched by another, I'm clinging on, even as I am held fast in these dreadful claws. The rush of wind made worse by the wings beating hard against the air. I know I live in the shade and the damp, but I do, or at least I did, enjoy the soft breath of fresh air against my feelers. Soon now, very soon, I will feel no longer. There was a story, I remember now as I look down on those once lovely fields below, a story of how the end stopped, even avoided by another's whim, or chance, or perhaps design. I never had the chance to make up my mind. A joke. My mind is broken in this airy place. But that story of what? Hope springs eternal, she said, my mother said, as we watched the birds search underneath the shards where we did not hide. We tricked them, fooled them then. And all that time, until my last mistake was made and the crow swooped across the field and scooped me up in these scrawny claws. Hope springs eternal. He might let me go yet.
Come on, chum. Don't look glum. Have some fun. Bang the drum. Take a run. Hug your mum. Kiss a nun. Chew some gun. Shoot a gun. Today is the day you worried about yesterday, and here you are today worrying about tomorrow. Never comes. Now then, lad, don't look sad. Rise up, buck up, brighten up, cheer up, chin up, perk up, liven up, speak up, man up, sup up, pay up, pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile through your fears and sorrow. Smile and the world's your oyster. Carpe diem, mum. Don't be dumb. Put on makeup. Wake up. Make haste. Make love. Make do and mend your ways. Make trouble. Make mine a double. Make hay while the sun shines on the righteous. Go for it, mate. Life is great. Get happy. Cut out tatty. Dress natty. Look snappy. Change your nappy. Get chatty with a lassie. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Pack up all your cares and woe. Tomorrow is another first day of the rest of your life is just a bowl of cherries. Get woke, Dad. Just be glad you're not young anymore for the merry-go-round. Forget the cold. Forget your old, be told, be bold, behold the lamb. Forget your troubles, come on, get with it. There are good times just around the corner of the street in case a certain little luck be a lady tonight. Watch your miss, blow me a kiss, life is bliss. Give sad a miss, listen to this. I'm broke, what a dope. I don't mope, I'll cope. Don't pass that rope, let's elope. We'll live in hope, spring's eternal.
Oh, light at the end of the tunnel. But isn't that what they all say? You're meaning to tell me that even when I'm lost at sea, swirling down into a whirlpool, that suddenly a humpback whale shall appear out of the blue, sweeping me into its gaping maw and saving me from certain peril. And even when I've been sealed into a cardboard box, which in turn is left next to a bonfire, the flames rapidly closing in, that it'll all be fine. The fire will end up feeling sympathetic and put itself out. And even when I'm confined to a pitch-black cave, its entrance obstructed by a boulder, all is not lost, for a big friendly giant is scheduled to arrive, destroy the cave and stroll off into the sunset with me on his shoulder. Simply put, you mean to say that there is always an escape, a way out, a light at the end of the tunnel. Out of curiosity, though, I have to ask, what about the darkness that lies at the start and all within said tunnel? And the incessant shaking of your hands as you grip each brick along the wall, coarse to touch, clinging on for your life. The spiteful stones that pierce your feet to try and purge those last shreds of determination in your body. The curses you utter with each step, doing yourself no favours in creating an echo chamber of negativity. And let's not forget the sheer bite of the frost of winter on your skin, bringing to you the harsh conclusion you're stuck in the cold, you're isolated, you're alone. And though it's all well and good for you to brush over this bitter truth with messages of hope and sunshine and light at the end of the tunnel, the fact of the matter is this: all of the toil that I've just described is real, if not literally, and it's ubiquitous. That isn't to say that we should all wallow in despair. Hope can still prevail, but not in the conventional, linear way that your banal phrase brings to the forefront. I mean like how the seasons change, the buds on the trees begin to bloom again, how animals re-emerge after a long hibernation. Like the animals, we humans have been forced into a sort of hibernation. Only A, we had no choice in the matter, and B, well, the collective mental health of humanity haven't taken a huge liking to it. We've been in the throes of a 12-month-long winter, and finally, spring is upon us. Traditionally, it's a time of regrowth, but for us now, it's a time of rebirth. Life is starting again. It will start again, and maybe by chance or even fate, if you believe in such a thing. We're all sticking on for the ride.
It's been 10 months since I got George. He was a sorry-looking thing when I saw him, all wilted and dejected in the Tesco foyer. I, like everyone else I assume, resolved only to queue up to get in, whiz around like a game of supermarket sweep on speed, and leave before anyone could say hands, face, space. But seeing the arrayed pot sitting there like so many verdant beggars petitioning for light, I bought him, got him home and established in pride of place on the sideboard, and in just a few short weeks, George had died of natural causes. Well, presumably natural. I mean, serial neglect is natural for me, it turns out, so I'm counting it. He was given a full funeral in the green bin, and I said a few words, most of them 4 letters, as his dehydrated remains settled into the burial mound of discarded coffee grounds. Since then, I've exhausted a veritable royal line of Tesco value Georges in an attempt to keep at least one on the throne for at least 2 weeks, and was all too pleased when the garden centres opened up again in the summer. Finally, with some expert help and good quality choices, I could cultivate success. And I did, in a manner of speaking. I successfully returned 3 further specimens to the earth, insofar as garden waste counts as earth, in rather less livesome states than they entered into it. My green fingers stained red with the metaphorical blood of innocent flora. I inquired further, absorbing good housekeeping and Cheshire life, like a leaf drinks in the light, circling the best plants for working from home as I went. For my birthday last year, I was gifted a herb garden for the kitchen windowsill. Armed as I was with sage wisdom, it was only a matter of time before something prospered. I just had to bay leaf. Can't remember when I gave up on the herbs. Probably about the time the peace lily died. Now that did annoy me. Call that easy to keep, Gardener's World, because Gardener's World clearly isn't this one. By autumn, I was as despondent as George had been in that foyer. I thought of sodding it all off and getting something shiny and plastic, but I resolved against a plant that would outlive me, my children, their children, and quite probably the end of the world. Ultimately, I went for something as prickly as I'd become about the whole affair. George the umpteenth, a Christmas cactus. We'd sit there, the 2 of us, for days blending into weeks on end. I'd glare at him from across the room, daring him, just daring him to die on me like the rest. Eventually, buds appeared, and like a seed-gifted rainfall, my heart began to swell. Could it be just this once he lives? Well, no, it couldn't, as the buds dropped off one by one until December, and so too the petals on that new flower in my chest. Christmas was a gloomy occasion, lifted briefly once a day by my gin advent calendar until the big day itself, when rising that morning at 2 p.m, I lamented my calendar being only 24 days, resolved to open the bottle-shaped gift underneath the cactus, and in doing so, almost completely missed the pink bloom rising atop the gift, affixed to the tip of a spiked train of green. The best thing to come out of these months might have been pink, but it wasn't Gordon's. It was George's!
How much of us have the stars seen from their lofty seats in the boxes of the Théâtre Céleste, where chat they merrily away among themselves as billions of players tread their worldly stage, where each life tells a tale its author hopes gripping enough to draw the omnipotent eye of the universe? Do the stars find merit in such performance? Do they, with their eons of experience and twinkling wizened eyes, find us comical? Laugh they at our daily plights, and in doing seem to shimmer and thrum with mirth in the night's auditorium? Do they mock and deride, dropping the curtain of clouds to early end our piteous routine? Do they take offence, such as now, when a lowly actor seeks to vainly probe and posit the actions and thoughts of the ancient cosmos? Do wrathful supernovae hurl their blazing censures and burn away in fury? Do they see tragedy and, like its victims, weep? Extraterrestrial tears falling in showers upon the earth, some heavenly bodies casting themselves from their splendour to fall, that we might wish upon their sacrifice and hope for better scenes in happier acts. Sit they still, regardless, on every night in the same playhouse, to watch the same stories, as told by different people each time, such that no two are ever quite alike. The red giant still blushes at love's first kiss, and the white dwarf ever smaller for the colours on show, the pulsar beating in tune with every heart. They have watched us rise and seen us fall countless times, yet stay to see what heights we may yet reach when we try again. And we will try again, to stand once downed, to look up at the brightness above us and reach out, to find purchase in a surface we've barely broken, and yet, by being broken, break on through. To stand on the edge of forever, that stage at the end of all things, and to rapturous celestial applause take our final bow, with a light on our faces and a smile on our lips. What glory there is in this, and what peace, to dream only of the brightest finale in that endless dark of space, where stardust becomes stars.
Funny things, aren't they? Names. They're such a big deal. Your identity, your tag, and such a huge responsibility to bestow. I've heard lots of parents in my line of work saying things like, oh, we were going to call them such and such, but when they arrived, they didn't look like that. Well, of course they didn't. They looked like a pink blob. And you're not going to call it pink blob, are you? But at least they gave it some thought. Unlike some, I mean, Neville, really? And Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, you may well love the name Jennifer, but chances are it'll get shortened to Jenny, and then where will you be? And don't even get me started on poor old Michael Hunt. I'd like to think if I ever had children, I'd really give it some thought. You know, put the first name with the surname, whatever that may be, before saddling the poor and suspecting child with it. Like I wish my parents had. I did have the conversation with them several times. Why? What were you thinking? But they would just look at each other in that dopey way of theirs and say, we waited for you for so long. You were so precious, so longed for. Cute. So thanks, Mum and Dad, Mr. and Mrs. Springs. This is me, Hope Springs. I hated it for years, of course. High school was a delight. Still, it could have been worse. They could have called me Alice. There was one chap at school who thought he was being very clever, though he wasn't the sharpest tool in the box. And he used to yell, "Good day," at me in an Australian accent whenever he saw me. But when Mum finally became too weak to fight the cancer any longer, and soon after Dad decided he wasn't strong enough to carry on, not even for me, my name, the name they gave me, was all I had left of them. I think of them now, sitting there and deciding on it, looking at each other in that dopey way of theirs, And instead of making me angry, it makes me smile. They thought about me. It meant something to them and to me. And so I will be eternally Hope Springs.
I'll tell you something. I think those Greeks were wrong about that Pandora woman and her crazy box thing. What they told us was that when she opened that stupid lid, all the nasty bits we're having to live with burst out, and now we can't get rid of them. Our illnesses, all the violence, all the nasty lies people tell us, not to mention the mind-numbing misery we have to put up with, and the fact that there's always something we need but can't have. It's all her fault, you know. If she'd done what she'd been told, she'd have left the box well alone. But oh no, not her. And what's more, we'd have been all right if she hadn't slammed the lid shut in a blind panic before the one thing we really did need also got out. It would have been okay putting up with all the other crap if she'd just let Hope get out as well. But no, she didn't have the sense to let us have that. Just all the bad bits, and with no chance of sorting them out. Anyway, that's what the Greeks told us in their weird stories about their gods that lived up on the mountains. So what she lumbered us with was lots of grief and pain, and no hope of getting away from it. But maybe, well, just maybe, there's another view. The angry and nasty Greek god that gave her the box, Zeus, was a sneaky old so-and-so, and he wanted Pandora to completely empty the box and let the humans have all the nasty bits, including the hope that they could deal with them. But he knew, or thought he knew, they wouldn't be able to. Result: full-time misery for those petty flawed humans with only fruitless hope to cling on to. The ever-failing hope was simply another part of Zeus's evil intent. The constant dashing of the expectation of something better was itself just another burden for those frail and faulty humans to bear. 100% endless, hopeless misery for mankind. But maybe, just maybe, there was an overlooked characteristic inside those tiny people that even the chief of those gods hadn't seen. When he and his mate Prometheus first created those little humans and released them to live at the bottom of the mountains, Zeus didn't realize they'd already given them the potential for free thought and creative development. The gods saw them only as simple playthings for their own amusement. But we know they were wrong. It's almost as if the inflicting of adversity by that ancient god triggered a spark that lit a flame that grew into an inferno. Maybe it wasn't instantaneous, but it smouldered and expanded and grew into the source of so much inspiration that it cannot now be extinguished. The more that Pandora's accursed elements attack us, the hotter our flame gets. Maybe at first it just simmers, unsure how much it needs to grow. But following Newton's law, the action of adversity has the potential to create an opposite reaction to counter that adversity. Now, I suppose that reaction could be in the form of taking specific steps to change what's going wrong. But what's driving those steps? It's the knowledge that you can counter them and make them disappear, that you can make things better, and the belief that Pandora's curses are not insurmountable. The hope that we were denied by the premature slamming of the lid was not an external element that we needed to have gifted to us, as Zeus imagined, because we already had it. It may have been latent. It may have been slow to develop. It may have been a characteristic that young mankind needed to nurture. But whatever form it took, it grew and it strengthened. The more desperate and focused we become, the more capable we become of being fired up by the hope that we can and will change things for the better. So Zeus and Pandora can just get lost. We humans were born with the potential to hope. And having raised it to the point of belief, it becomes the ideal tool to counter the contents that escaped from that ancient and mythical Greek box.
When I was young, I always had books around me. I read a lot. I was given books as presents. I got old books passed down to me by other members of the family. I particularly liked getting book tokens at Christmas and really enjoyed spending them. It started off a lifelong obsession with books. When I got older and went off to university, I got a taste for browsing around second-hand bookshops. Saturdays would inevitably involve a trip to my favourite bookshops and bookstalls in the markets. This carried on when I started working, even though I could probably afford new ones. More regular trips to local second-hand bookshops, eyeing up the stock. Any visit to a new town or city was an opportunity to visit a different set of second-hand bookshops. I regularly came out with piles of books to add to the collection. I enjoyed the browsing and buying as much as the reading. My library was constantly expanding. You may notice this on the shelves behind me. So when I heard about Hay-on-Wye, a small town full of second-hand bookshops, it seemed like exactly the place I ought to go to. The problem is that Hay is a bit off the beaten track. It's not particularly close to anywhere. It's not the kind of place that you pass through on the way to somewhere else. So I never actually made it. Years passed. We might actually be talking 25, 30 years here. My partner Suzanne and I made a list of places we'd like to visit. Hay-on-Wye duly made it onto the list. A few years later, he made it to the top of the list. We booked a couple of days in a B&B. I was finally going to get there. We arrived in the town. It was late on in the afternoon. The shops were closing. It was very picturesque in the sunshine. We walked about a bit and I eyed up the bookshops. There were certainly a lot of them. There was a map showing all the bookshops in the town. I think bookshops outnumbered pubs by about 10 to 1. Clearly, we were not going to spend all our time in bookshops. That would be mad even for me. So the following day, we had a drive around the Golden Valley and got back to Hay mid-afternoon. I was going to have to pick the bookshop to visit first. I'd noticed the cinema bookshop the day before. As the name suggests, it was an old cinema that had been turned into a bookshop. It had obviously been a reasonably sized cinema back in the day. It was now packed with the gunnels with books over 2 floors. Hundreds of thousands of books, not hundreds and thousands, hundreds of thousands. The floors were creaking with them. I wandered from room to room using the map provided. It was overwhelming. So I needed a plan. I decided to look at the drama section. I've got a lot of scripts, came in theatre all the years. Found a drama section. 4 bookcases, floor to ceiling packed with old plays. Even this looked a bit much. So I looked for something that wasn't old and falling apart. I noticed a nice new looking copy of Stephen Berkoff Plays One. In fact, here we go. Here's the play here. I've seen a lot of Berkoff down the years. Really enjoyed the plays, seen them on stage and reading. This was a good find. So, picked the book off the shelf and opened the cover to see the price. This is something I've done countless times down the years. What was different about this was what was written inside the cover. Matt Walters. I know Matt Walters. In fact, I know this Matt Walters. It was his book. After waiting 30 years, I'd driven 150 miles to Hay-and-Wye. I'd come to a town with 50 bookshops in it. I'd walked into a bookshop with hundreds of thousands of books in it, and the very first book I picked off the shelf belonged to a friend of mine. Absolutely unbelievable. I can't wait to get back into that crazy world out there where all sorts of bizarre, random, unpredictable, wacky things can happen that will make you scratch your head, laugh, cry, or in my case, make my jaw drop to the floor with astonishment. So let's enjoy that world. And in conclusion, to paraphrase Jane Austen, reader, I bought the book.
I think it's important to stick to your principles. Should thine own self be true, etc. First question. Are you a hopeful sort of person? Caught a little off guard, I confess to occasionally being optimistic. I didn't feel I could commit to anything more definite if I was being honest. I do sometimes try to look on the bright side of things, I said, but only occasionally, in the most exceptional circumstances. Not the normal run of things, you see. Normally I'm not naturally optimistic. It's quite the opposite, in fact. Most days I tend to expect the toaster to overbrown the toast to the point of near, if not complete, cremation. I expect the tea bag to burst in my mug and the soft-boiled breakfast egg to turn out more like a child's playground missile than anything actually edible. I expect to miss the bus that connects with the tram that takes me to the centre of town for work, and if I don't miss it, it's so full that I have to wait for the next one. And as you might imagine, the domino effect is begun with one mishap knocking into the next, and so on, ad nauseum, gradually increasing in scale until the day's inevitably disastrous end. So optimism isn't something that comes easily to you, they asked. Not at all, I admitted. Quite the reverse, generally speaking. Actually, I tend to be rather accident-prone, but no one's complained so far. I hope that reassures you. But they didn't seem convinced, shuffling papers and looking sideways at each other. What's the worst that's happened so far, they asked. Well, difficult to differentiate, really, I answered. The most recent incident was only yesterday. I scolded myself quite badly when I splashed myself with boiling water in the process of spooning out my soft-boiled egg from the pan into the egg cup. During the resulting ministrations, my cat took offence at my neglecting to provide her morning feed, seized a trailing end of the bandage and used it to swing up and scratch my face so badly that I had to visit A&E for a tetanus jab. Thus, the eye patch. Not so disastrous, said one, disappointedly. And another. We thought that was part of your interview presentation. After all, every children's presenter needs a gimmick or quirk that catches the eye, so to speak. Well, usually I rely on my innate sense of quirky humour, I said. The one-liners that everyone knows me for. Such as, they said. Well, did I tell you about my last job? I was fired from the calendar factory. All I did was take a day off. No response. Why do bees hum? I ventured, trying to inject a note of thrilling suspense. Because they don't remember the lyrics? One asked tiredly. I can try to be more upbeat, I ventured, if that would make you look upon my application more favourably. That's not always easy to do, especially for a clown like me. Needless to say, the interview terminated unfavourably. Predictably, I left feeling pretty down. I got into the lift and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed and the lift began its downward slide. Suddenly, I was overcome by an overwhelming sense of deflation. A rushing sound as of air, violently escaping, filled my ears, threatening to burst my eardrums as the lift plummeted uncontrollably downwards with me singing at the top of my lungs, "Always look on the bright side of life."
When I first came here, I wasn't sure whether I belonged. It was a strange atmosphere. I'd head down for breakfast with all the other oldies, and I'd see them mixing and mingling, chatting and joking. But I wasn't part of that. I mean, they tried. One or the other of them had asked me how I was, or what my plans were for the day, or, well, small talk, you know, small. But that's not me. I don't do small talk. I was a bloody captain of industry. Maybe not captain, but I ran that packaging department for 35 years in total. The talk I indulged in was big talk, highbrow, complex, detailed, intelligent. I never chatted about the weather or what was on the telly or anything like that. It didn't signify. Maybe that's why I never married. Let's be honest. It wasn't that I couldn't find the right person to spend my life with. It's just that I scared them off with my intensity, I guess you'd call it. I know it can be intense. I know it can be intimidating, arrogant, pompous. I didn't play nicely with others. Too ambitious, too driven. So, when I had my little medical incident, and when the company decided that perhaps it was time for me to move on, well, I didn't adapt too well. I spent a decade rolling around my house, seeing nobody, speaking to nobody, nothing creative to do. My only escape was University Challenge and books. Lots and lots of books. And silence. There was a lot of that too. And then the day came when I couldn't care for myself properly anymore. And I ended up here. Hope Springs. Typically upbeat name for a care home, isn't it? And everyone was so happy and bouncy. I don't know, just so bloody enthusiastic. God, I hated it. And one day, I was in the lounge area, reading the Telegraph, contemplating having a crack at the crossword, when I heard two of them, Derek and Victoria, it was, chatting about their plans for a quiz night and how they needed a quizmaster. I don't know what possessed me, but I spoke up. They looked at me as though I'd got two heads. Must have been the first time I'd done anything other than grunted. I'll do it if you like, I said. I know a thing or two. I could put together a quiz for you. And I did. And it was bloody brilliant. Bit too hard for some of them, granted, but Derek and Victoria, that last choice, they were good. They knew their stuff. Proper impressed I was. And we chatted afterwards. Decent, interesting, stimulating conversation. It was magnificent. That's when I suggested we should go to the quiz night at the local pub as a team. Derek and Victoria and me and Joyce. I like Joyce, and I think she likes me. And we're a proper quiz team with a name and everything. The Hope Springs Eternals. That's us. I'm really looking forward to it.
What a day. Oh, I've not stopped. I know it's an old cliche, but I really don't know how I ever found time to work. When I was a lecturer, I used to work such long hours, and then more hours researching, writing papers. My social life never suffered though. Being part of a university meant that there were countless drinks functions, talks, dinner parties. But this stupid disease meant I had to take early retirement. Oh, don't get me wrong, the university were very accommodating, but it just wasn't practical, and I'm a very practical person. Then, when I could no longer live at home and having no family of my own, I chose to move here. Actually, it was wonderful. A ready-made social life and so many activities. Just being able to chat with other living souls and yet still be on my own when I wanted to be, when I wanted to read or think. My body may be weak and feeble, but my mind certainly is not. There's a real mix of people here from all walks of life. From a social anthropological view, it's fascinating. Although, of course, my first love will always be archaeology. And there are plenty of old bones around here. So, this morning, I played a rather fractious game of bridge and then a really strenuous physio session before lunch. I was rather tired after that, but I simply couldn't resist the macrame workshop. Apparently, it's quite fashionable again, and I was rather pleased with my efforts. Then a couple of games of Scrabble with Marjorie. I was very gentle with her. A restorative gin and tonic, and before dinner, and then an early night with Hilary Mantle. Oof, awful woman. Bizarre writing style, but I do need to finish the trilogy. That reminds me, I must collate my notes to send to her publisher. Surprising highlight of the week was yesterday evening. We held a quiz night, and this was so much better than previous efforts. The questions were actually decent, and none of that reality show or modern pop music nonsense. The quizmaster was rather dour, Yorkshire, but he did a good job, and I'm not sure how long he's been here. He seems a bit of a loner, not one for small talk. But afterwards, he, Victoria, Derek and I were chatting, and Harry, that's the quizmaster's name, suggested we make up a team and go and try our luck at the local hostelries. So we are now the Hope Springs Eternal team. Awful name. Not my choice. Outvoted. And we are going to the quiz night at the Royal Oak next week. £50 for the winning team, and I can spend it at the local bookshop. Victoria told me afterwards she thinks Harry really likes me. Really, what a notion. We're not teenagers. Still, he likes books. And although he doesn't say much, what he does say is interesting. Anyway, roll on next Thursday.
Victor told me what was happening. It's coming down, he said. He had that big beaming smile on his face. I loved that smile, that disarming beam of light. His eyes were sparkling. Let's get down there then, I said. He grabbed my hand and we ran through the streets. Everyone else was running the same way. They had all heard. It was so unbelievable. We had lived in darkness for so long, and now there was light. I have to admit, I was scared. Everyone knew someone who had died there. We had learnt to live with fear for so long, it had become like a bodily ache that shoots pain through the nervous system. We were a young couple in love. I was 23, Victor 25. What was happening, we could hardly believe would ever happen. Freedom awaited us after we had spent our lives locked down. When we got there, people were standing on top of the wall. There was cheering, music, laughter, and tears. Victor turned to me and kissed me. I thought my heart was going to burst right out of my chest. The world was changing, and we had hope. They can try to build walls between us, but people will always find a way of knocking them down. Isn't life wonderful? He said. I cried as we walked through into the West. Everyone was so joyful. They were all so pleased to see us. It was like a huge weight had been lifted from us, and I thought we would float into the air. We got drunk that night on hope. Hope for the future, hope for ourselves, hope for mankind. Vic and I married and settled in the UK. Last year we lost his beaming smile to cancer, but he remained positive to the end. I have a piece of the wall on my mantelpiece. My kids think of it as a piece of old rubble, but to me, it represents a powerful idea. Where there is hope, mighty walls can be reduced to single stones.
We were 2 meters apart. It felt a hell of a lot further. We were having a conversation. We had known each other my whole life, and I think this was the first one we had ever had. Sure, we had talked. We had always talked. Did you see the score? Work going all right? Yes, that's a really nice one. Yeah, I had a pint of that a little while ago. On offer, was it? Nice. Talking is fine. Talking is safe. Talk can be small. The weather, the food, nothing serious. Talk. That's the thing, though. You can talk to anyone. You can hate somebody and still talk to them. Fine. Safe. Small. Conversations are different somehow. They can still be small, only a few words. But they aren't small. They are honest. They are open. They are risky. Should I have just talked? Should I have just been fine, safe, small? No. Finally, I'm not just talking. I am being myself. For the first time, they are getting to see me. We were 2 meters apart. It felt a hell of a lot closer.